So, I've been having these chips lately. Are
Yeah.
you into chips?
Dude, I'm actually not that into chips. The last chips that I had was like years ago, I want to say.
Okay, you gotta hit up Whole Foods, dude. Annie's Cheese Puffs. Shout out Annie. You a bad bitch. They're really good. Really addicting, but probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, they're actually like, what flavor are they?
I mean, it's just
Just
regular cheese puffs.
okay.
Yeah. Usually I'll go for the popcorn style or the typical, Ruffles, like just regular salt. I don't want nothing fancy on my shit.
Nothing fancy.
Yeah.
The last ones I actually tried, which was years ago, was Miss Vicky's jalapeno chips.
Yo.
Shout out Miss Vicky.
Shout out Miss Vicky.
She a bad bitch.
There you go.
All right, you want to do this?
Let's do this.
All right, folks, welcome to another Debatable at Best podcast, where we talk about everything from global markets, economy, life, and presumably bad coffee, but we haven't touched on that bit yet. But over here, don't expect any answers, just some perspective. I am your host, Ray.
And my name is Amol, and today we're going to start off with the other chip, NVIDIA chips.
Ooh, I like the way you segued into chips.
I feel like we're in this world where chips and semiconductors, they're kind of running everything, right? AI, technology, cars, blockchains, and crypto. It's very pervasive, and it kind of is basically the driving force of civilization right now.
Well, yeah, I would say, yeah, right now, definitely into the future. I don't think there isn't much of modern day life that doesn't require anything that doesn't have a chip in it. From something as small as, the seat adjustment in your car, the little motors where you can kind of adjust your seat and your lumbar support, that even requires a little silicon chip.
Yeah, I mean, I think cars themselves, the stat was like there's about 1,000 or 2,000 chips in every single car, especially the modern day cars.
2,000?
Yeah, there's so many like little micro chips that are guiding so many aspects of the vehicle. Even if you're, let's just say, like moving your mirror back and forth, right?
Right.
In some way that is automated, and I would probably say like they're counting those as chips too.
I didn't mind to side tangent on the car bit, but do you think like a car company like GM uses more chips per car than a Tesla would? Because a Tesla is just using a giant computer that's centralized, but do you think they're using more chips? I was going to say per capita, but more chips per car pita than a Tesla.
Those puns are getting good.
Punny, right?
Yeah, they are punny. I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I would probably figure that Tesla probably has way more advanced chips, and maybe the GM and typical, like my Toyota, is basic chips, But nonetheless, I mean, the point is that chips are running the world, and, more recently we had the NVIDIA earnings come up, which was, I think, a beat on expectations. And I think that gave markets sort of an understanding that, hey, the world still needs more and more, semiconductors to basically run all things, data centers, AI, whatever the demand for AI is, blockchains, cars, etc., or phones. So it's kind of given the market maybe more insight into the future of this thing is not going away, and the world is, ever more like dependent on chips.
Okay. I think an interesting aspect of the whole chip thing is, and we may have touched on this outside of the podcast, is how chip manufacturing is also going to change going forward. Because a lot of it's like, centralized with these huge players like TSMC,
Yeah.
right, which are Taiwan based.
Yeah.
and obviously we have a huge, um, we rely on them heavily to manufacture and fab them, right? And I feel like Intel was trying to create their own fab, but they kind of missed on a lot of marks when it came to the chip world. They were late to mobile tech, mobile chips, and the company is kind of like always seesawing back and forth. Do you think that chip scaling is going to come full scale into the United States?
I mean, I feel like when we get into that world, we have probably entered a geopolitical chasm that we're not able to get out of, which is specifically with China. I think there's a reason why America is doing its best to have the TSMC, fab factories in Arizona, right? We know that there is an aggressor, China, that is basically going to have some form of control over Taiwan to a degree that America may not necessarily like. That's kind of why we really, quote unquote, protect Taiwan, right? We have so many troops in the seas, Navy and Air Force bases nearby. I think America knows that this is a very important aspect of technology that is, going to pretty much be a prevalent part of society, very important to all things defense, AI, like I said, phones, data centers, blockchain tech, etc. So I don't know at what point we're going to be 100% in America,
Mm.
but that time isn't now, and it's probably not for the next 2 to 3 years.
Mm. What I thought was interesting was you were saying that like TSMC is possibly going to open up something, in the South. What I heard is that the production that TSMC is bringing to the United States are not even like their most advanced chips.
Probably not. I mean, I would imagine that China and Taiwan, or especially TSMC as a company, is going to do their best to try to retain as much of their IP as possible. I don't think TSMC as a company wants to fully align themselves with America either. If that was the case, they would have just jumped ship straight to America, right?
Mm.
Obviously, it's much more difficult to, move an entire company and all its personnel and all the knowledge that comes with it and the machines and whatnot. But I think they're playing it strategically, almost like geopolitically balancing America and China in its, in like a seesaw.
But
Right.
do you think one of the reasons, like, let's say they could, right? Let's say they did want to move manufacturing full scale best chips into the United States. One of the things that I'm kind of hearing on the ground, and I don't know if it's true or not, is simply the labor force and the skill set required to perform to work in fabs is just something that Taiwan and countries that do, are foundries essentially, they have plenty of supply of being able to train and skill that labor, right? And in America, to build something like that and get it online would be a much larger, more challenging effort because we just don't have that skill set.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think, some aspects of the Taiwanese workforce is definitely more skilled than America's in that regard. But I would imagine that if you bring TSMC here to America, Arizona, or wherever specifically in America, probably needs like a solid year or two to upskill personnel. Maybe
Yeah.
3 to 4 years, but you could probably get them up to speed. What you want to start doing now in anticipation of this inevitable move, you want to start sending people from America into Taiwan to start getting skilled. And whenever the move slowly happens from TSMC more into America, I think it will make that transition more seamless.
So this is just kind of me thinking out loud. What would a job like working at TMC be classified as? Is that a blue collar job?
It might be blue collar. I would imagine that not all of it is super high engineering skill set or, science based. I'm sure there's going to be cooling requirements and, all things related to, uh, the mechanics of how the machines work, right? These are not all related to the semi itself and the development aspect of it. It's probably like the maintenance of the machine in the factory, right? And those blue collar jobs can easily be filled because America does have experience in building industry sort of based companies, right? I think it's probably going to be a net positive for America as a whole to go that direction.
Yeah, but when you say industry kind of based stuff, and obviously you know this, that America is more a service economy now.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the push to bring so much manufacturing back? Do you even think we could even, I know this is again a little bit of a side tangent, but do you even think that's a plausible thing to be like, okay, yeah, we need to kind of go all in this AI chip race? Do you think it even makes sense to be like, okay, let's push America back into manufacturing again? We're a full-on service economy.
I don't think it'll be a choice that we'll have to make, out of excitement. It'll be more of a choice that will be pushed on us because, like I said, it might just be a very tough geopolitical choice that TSMC might have to make, or America might have to force TSMC's hand because they'll just simply say, hey, listen, if China goes after you, maybe we're not going to be able to fully protect you. That should be enough to scare TSMC because I'm pretty sure, the workers in China, they're probably way more scared of what China is going to do to them and absorb their company or basically turn them into their own little, factory of whatever they want them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Versus in America, at least that they have the freedom and they'll have the ability to scale and continue on business. But I do think that it may not be an easy move. It'll be more of like, where is this fight and schism going to happen between America and China, and how is that going to lead to a unfortunate outcome for TSMC? And like I said, I think it's more of it's more of like a when, not if.
Another thing that's kind of interesting about this whole chip thing is when you look at the equipment even required to manufacture something, there's really only one company that makes the necessary equipment. So wouldn't you consider, I don't know if you want to use the word bottleneck, but isn't that somewhat of a bottleneck?
It definitely is a bottleneck. I do think that companies have tried to solve that, obviously Intel being one, right? This is kind of why Trump tried to basically buy Intel or have a government stake in Intel because of national security, right? I can kind of see merit to that, but Taiwan Semiconductor simply just excels at less than like 7 nanometer chips, right? Creation of chips. It's just simply not possible for any company in the world to accomplish what they can.
TSMC, you're saying?
TSMC.
I thought TSMC was getting close to 4 nanometers now.
That's what I'm saying. Less than 7 is something that they are really good at as a category. And categorically, they are the true winners. And everybody else outside of that, anything 7 and below, they're just not able to compete with TSMC.
Okay.
I would say probably another important company in the same spectrum of TSMC is ASML, which is the Dutch company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a big embargo from the Netherlands and America, basically not shipping this EUV, which is like their huge lithography machines, to China. Mm-hmm. And part of that is because they just don't want Chinese government and industry to have access to such high tech. And ASML is, like, I was reading an example of how do you compare TSMC and ASML. It's kind of, if TSMC is the chef of making chips, ASML is more of like the most important oven in the world.
And that's a good way to put it.
And it is truly like an oven, as in it's the machine that actually allows the cooking. So their machines are, I think, somewhere in the ballpark of $200 to $300 million each.
Yeah.
And the bottleneck, similar to TSMC, is, these guys are the only ones in the world to do it at that scale at that cost and at that caliber,
Right.
right?
Right.
So there's these two companies in the world that are leading the entire effort on all things semis. And, it just seems interesting that we're now in a world where you have the West trying to battle it out with the East of, okay, well, everybody wants to be in the AI race. Everybody wants to have, semis and chips and cars and phones, etc. But very few can do it.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's very interesting. What's kind of funny? The topic that I was going to talk about today on the back end relates really heavily, and again, no pun intended, powers the whole AI race. And that's right, folks. I'm talking about energy itself. So
Energy definitely is a huge bottleneck. Yeah, you have a really good point there.
yeah, so what I kind of wanted to talk about and kind of like look over for the past couple of days was just where are we as America? Like, where have we come from in terms of energy? Where do we kind of sit at? And like, where are we? What are we looking at in the future? So, what I kind of did was I kind of compiled like some information on what energy actually looked like for the past two presidencies. So, I'm talking about Biden era and Trump 1.0. And over the last several years, the US has not only like leaned super hard into oil and gas, but natural gas and crude oil were just actually key parts of both of their energy policies.
Wow, I had no idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in 2024, US total energy production actually hit a record. It was 103 quadrillion BTUs.
Oh my god.
Yeah, yeah. And if you look at like the breakdown of natural gas versus crude oil versus coal, because we still use them. On our last pod, we talked about, we don't really just, or I don't know if we touched on this last time, but we don't really, we don't really replace energy sources. We add on to energy sources, and that's kind of how it's always been. Natural gas made up approximately 38% of the entire U.S. energy output. Crude oil was 27%. And that just keeps going up because America has become a net exporter instead of a net importer.
Wow.
Yeah. And coal continued its decline, actually. So in 2024, U.S. coal production was 512 million short since tons short since 1964.
Insane.
Yeah. And as far as like the renewable end of things, like where we could possibly go in the future,
Like nuclear, you mean?
I mean, solar,
Solar.
wind, anything that's like renewable, right? That actually has taken like a steady growth. So solar capacity jumped approximately 25% last year, while wind only rose about 8. So there is growth, obviously not as much because like I said, when we're drilling, a big portion of the energy, and especially just energy in total, wasn't for US use. So in 2024, 30% of US's primary energy production was exported in the form of fossil fuels.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So what about, okay, so for now being an exporter, is that kind of a good thing? Because if we had just sort of, kept that oil and crude oil for ourselves, doesn't that drop a lot of the prices back at home?
Well, you would think because there's different ways to look at it. So like a good question to raise, like you're kind of saying in the same ballpark, are Americans paying for energy to fuel other countries, right? Like that's one way to look at it. Plus, is the growth in those renewables, while it's there and there shows momentum, it's slower than where it needs to be. I feel like a lot of people agree on that. But in terms of that, you would think energy costs would be lower in the United States, but they've been dropping a little bit. But since, like I said, since we're a net exporter, we're very price sensitive to our imports on energy. So it's really just what are we buying that energy at and what can we sell it for? Because here's the other thing, right? Um, the the current expectation for U.S. crude oil production is averages about 13.6 million barrels per day this year as of 2025. And that's going up to about 13.76 million barrels per day next year. And that's by World Energy News. They just recently reported that. Natural gas, so dry gas production, is projected to go up. And as far as the mix goes, in 2024, renewables, which is a combination of wind, solar, biomass, believe it or not, geothermal, and hydro, only kind of kept level at 25% between all of them. And in terms of a trend, um, capacity is heavily outweighed. So right, so natural gas is approximately 42.7%, coal is 15%, wind is 11.6, solar 10.1, and nuclear is 7.8. Um, so they expect renewable energy production to keep going up like 12% ish. But that's kind of like a good kind of summary of where we are right now. What I'm kind of interested to see is like what we're doing going into the future. Like, I don't know if you were paying attention to the COP30 summit that recently went on.
No, I wasn't. What is that?
So COP is the UN kind of backed climate change conference that happens. It's called the COP30 because it's held by 30 of the largest nations. This year is being held in, I think it's pronounced Belém, Brazil. And it's their whole focus this year is how to implement climate commitments. Like, who can we hold accountable and be like, okay, you come here, you're committing to this, this much of clean energy going forward, or whatever it is. What was interesting though, the U.S. did not send any high level officials at all.
Wow.
Completely missing from the entire COP30. And you know who wasn't missing? And they actually had the biggest booth in the center of the entire thing? Your boy China.
Damn.
Yep. The largest polluting nation in the world came out strong at COP30, set up a huge thing and said, this is what we're going to do for solar. This is what we're going to do for wind. This is what we're going to do for battery tech. And it was interesting to see that actually over 80 countries came. So I know it's called COP30, but over 80 countries came. But China, which is, I don't want to say they're our biggest foe, but our biggest competition for sure, they're trucking right on ahead. They're not stopping.
Yeah, I mean, I keep hearing about China having more and more access to power. They are one of the largest creators of nuclear, power plants. I think they've deployed 25 to 35 new power plants. So I think they see the future in the same way where they understand deep down power is a necessity to fuel technology, especially AI, and they do not want to slip up in that race. And
well, yeah, I think that's kind of what it's between, right? Like when the president was asked, between climate change efforts, which obviously he doesn't believe exist, and the AI efforts, they're just like, yeah, the AI effort is where we're going to put all of our eggs, that we're going to put our eggs in that basket. Climate change is more or less of a, yeah, that's like a back burner kind of situation for them.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing though. Some would argue that by stepping back, the US is actually ceding climate change leadership to the powers like China that are increasingly dominating green tech diplomacy.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I could totally see that because China probably is going into how we see empires rising, which is increasingly trying to gain favorability amongst, other nations, building friendships, building bridges. And at the same time, they know that, like you said, America is kind of their main foe, and America's kind of fallen out of favor from a lot of countries because of just the past year of the aggression that Trump has had,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be tariffs or his rhetoric, language. all things just America being America past few years. And China, I think, is strategically seeing advantage of how do we pick up all these things that America's slacking on and take advantage and bring more and more people into the fold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. But well, one thing I also kind of want to say is you would also have to take a look, right, to that point at how America is or isn't competing on that stage. So if you look at, again, where America sits and what they want to do going into the future, um, while US is expanding solar and wind, China and the EU are pushing even harder on clean tech. So that's number one, right? Clean tech, EVs, green infrastructure, that's there. So that's what's going to happen. Second thing is there's policy disconnects, right? So domestically, parts of the US, states and cities, right? They're all championing clean energy, but at the federal level, there's all these mixed messages, right? So like, um, the recent administration is prioritizing fossil fuels.
Yeah.
So that's a huge policy disconnect. There's also this kind of let's call it a scale between deciding over what is an investment and what is diplomacy. So if you look at it that way, private investment into green energy in the United States is growing, but the lack of consistent federal leadership actually weakens the US's ability to shape global climate agendas and clean tech trade. So what that ends up meaning is the US continues to export all of their fossil fuels, and it reinforces its role as simply an energy superpower, right? And that undercuts a lot of moral authority in pushing back for green transition globally. So basically, what does that mean? Like, there's a lot of mixed messaging, there's a lot of policy things, and there's just a lot of people who are fighting for clean tech industries. And on a federal level, we're just not giving it to them. So if the kind of fear that some people would say that they have is China's just, they're never going to relent. They're just going to grow and grow and grow. They have the tech to do it. They have the manufacturing facilities to do it. And if America just isn't going to do it, they're going to come in, the EU is going to come in, and they're going to bring the world up to that stage, and America is going to get left behind. So that is a real threat. That is very plausible.
I mean, that's, yeah, I can totally see the world heading off in that direction,
Yeah.
I think there's just so much happening in America. Like, we have so much to talk about of the internal politics and the external politics. Like, I know you have another another topic that you want to talk about, which I know is like really important. And I feel like it sort of segues from what we were just talking about, because the internal politics right now is, it's almost like they're trying to dismantle all the systems that exist versus how they see the world, I don't know, going about their way, and America is doing their best to, I don't know how to explain it. It just feels like there's just so much noise and chaos that's happening in America that people either are just fed up by it, or at the same time, they just don't care enough and don't have time enough because they're just doing their best to just survive.
Well, yeah, and if you look at it at a level of the everyday person, right? This entire shift is a huge deal, right? We're talking not only just for saving the planet purposes, right? We're talking about your power bills, right? Because you were talking about AI, right? That shit takes a lot of power, right? So you could see differences in your power bills. They could just mark it up, right?
Yeah.
Utility bills, including water, it could actually negatively affect job markets because you're sort of hindering job growth in that whole dimension, right? Um, and generally how America is going to compete on the global economy of the future, right? So all of that is what matters to the everyday person. America's stake in it seems like it's not just about being green; it's about staying powerful and relevant. Maybe forward looking, but right now that's not what it looks like.
It definitely isn't. America is struggling internally with all things related to politics and internal battles between parties, um, trying to ensure that inflation is kept at bay and unemployment isn't rising too much, and debt itself isn't too overblown. There's just too many things that are happening in America for it to focus solely on what really matters, which is like innovation, energy growth, um, especially focusing on AI and keeping all the competitors, especially China, at bay. We
Yeah.
just have we do not have a proper like priority set right now.
Yeah. No, and that's why I feel like it was important to talk about, because it's just so, like, we're just on such shaky ground right now. Like, does the current administration doesn't even know that, this is a we're always, I feel like America's always been a forward looking, we need to move this, we need to push forward in technology like we are doing with AI, and they realize that. But at this point, the oil lobbies are too powerful. Everyone's just trying to, we do need to power America, and we do need to push that, but they're just saying right now, pump, pumping oil is what's going to fuel the AI boom. And then we kind of worry about the green stuff later. But if you ask a lot of these tech companies, right, like what's the best approach, they would say, yeah, okay, let's maybe keep our production of oil status quo, but heavily implement green and then eventually transition. So we need to look at a hybrid approach where we're looking at both aspects of the stuff, right? We can't just be looking at one energy source. That might not be enough, because if it runs out, what are we going to do? You have to look at it from both angles. But again, like I said, oil lobby is too tough. That may not even happen.
Yeah. There's another topic that I want to jump into, which is somewhat of a connection of energy,
Mm-hmm.
and that is blockchain technology or crypto, right?
Lay it on me, brother.
Yeah.
Lay it on me. No homo.
I mean, the problem is, I feel like all technologies modern day are competing for that one resource that we just spoke about, which is energy. Blockchain, technology itself does the same. Whether it be, data center usage of what it does to GPUs, um, all these things require an X amount of energy, and blockchain tech is doing its best to pull energy towards it, right? The problem is that, if you kind of look at valuations of how crypto is this $3.5 trillion asset class, and then I kind of look at OpenAI, which is probably close to $1 trillion company. I know it's a private company, but valuation wise, it's probably up there, anywhere from 700 billion to a trillion. At the same time, what you have is OpenAI has 800 million users, and crypto has 35 million like weekly active users. Now, connecting this to energy, the point here is that if things in the energy world become more and more expensive, what that does is companies like OpenAI and companies within the AI space and semi space can afford to pay more costs for the energy. Whereas in crypto, they may not necessarily be able to use blockchain technology if the energy costs start going higher, right?
Hmm.
Because
I never
though
thought
it
of
is
that. Yeah.
though it is a high valuation industry, a lot of the value actually sits on the ability for startups to get started. And if all these startups are unable to pay, 25, 30K for, core GPU usage, or getting servers started up, or having, a place for their, compute to be in data centers, this stifles innovation in crypto.
Hmm.
And if you start then extrapolating this out with the original stat that I mentioned, which is OpenAI being $1 trillion company and crypto as an asset class, a full asset class worth 3.5 trillion, you know, OpenAI having 800 million weekly active users and crypto having 35 million, I think what's going to happen probably over the next year, maybe even the next several years, is you're going to see contraction in valuations of crypto where crypto might be overvalued, right? You're going to start
Mm,
seeing a lot of that money come out of crypto. And we, even in like the crypto space, what we've seen is there's definitely a lack of a bid that exists in crypto, and there's a persistent bid in AI, in equities, right? That just goes to show that the money in markets is seeking like proper alpha, and they know that, oh, well, AI is probably the best bid here because it is likely to be a 5, 10, 50 trillion dollar industry within 10 to 15 years, whereas crypto, it's already a 3.5 trillion dollar asset class, but it's just not growing at the pace that we thought 5, 7 years ago. The adoption rate is not changing that drastically. The weekly active users to the adoption rates amongst businesses or young people. So it's just something that I've been thinking about lately, is me being in this industry for so long. It tells me that the market itself, especially young people in crypto, are not really ready for like a shitty bad bear market.
right. And you're saying, if I understood that correctly, you're saying that a lot of this could be could be a downturn simply due to one kind of one shift in utility, which is energy costs.
I think that's probably one parameter that will lead to the downturn in crypto. I would imagine that many people are definitely factoring that in into their valuation process, because if you look at what it takes to build a startup in crypto, as well as if you're using blockchain technology and the costs associated with that, if the cost of energy itself is going up, then your margins start contracting, right? That
Sure.
that is effectively like valuation 101. And if your technology is not growing at the pace as, say, the AI tech out there is growing, well, one valuation is clearly wrong, and it's crypto, not the AI side, right? So I think that the market started to sniff that out probably a solid year ago, and Bitcoin's probably been the only asset that has been consistently bid up, whereas like 99.9% of crypto has been very cyclical, but more so down. And, it just goes to show that the market is always forward looking. It is already sniffing out crypto weakness, and it is, telling us, especially those of us who are deep in the trenches of crypto, that um, the market is sending a message to everybody, telegraphing and saying, like, show me the fucking money. And crypto has thought we had like a pair of aces in our pocket, whereas it's probably a deuce seven, you know?
Yeah. Do you think, the administration being so happy go lucky with crypto related, endeavors, let's just call it, that seems to be due for correction? Do you think that correction is going to happen first and an energy correction will happen later? Do you think timeline wise that's kind of going to happen at the same time? The only reason I'm asking is obviously you're further into the crypto world than I am. I'm more of a novice slash basic kind of side observer of the entire space, and you're kind of in it on a more daily basis. Um, um, More daily basis, I should say, because I was gonna shout out Solana Spaces right after that. Shout out Solana Spaces. So do you feel like there's going to be a downturn due to overcorrection on a near term for other reasons, and another correction due to energy? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I think energy is probably going to be a longer term factor, but it's always going to be a factor, right? Um,
And the other reason why I'm asking is because, as we all know, the crypto market is very volatile generally, right? With stable coins coming into play, we're talking something else. But generally, if you look at crypto, it seems to be a fairly volatile market. It will go up on consumer sentiment and retail sentiment one day, and then it'll come crashing the next hour.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question to you more bluntly is when do you think the next correction will happen?
I think we're already underway of a correction. I would probably say that um, the tantrum that we had in April was the first, sign of the market um, capitulating a little bit in understanding like what does all this mean for crypto, right? It was more so that the dynamics of the whole world is changing
Hmm.
right beneath our feet, and capital allocation, the way it is, thought about is overall, you know, going to be re-strategized because you cannot put the same amount of dollars in crypto with the same confidence that you did, you know, pre-Trump or post-Trump, or pre-tariff tantrum and post-tariff tantrum, right? It's just not the same world. I think there are certain times in history where you have to reevaluate your priors. And you have to understand that this marks a pretty significant milestone in a moment in history. And I think that the world has changed, as a pivot point post tariff tantrum. And I think crypto has been showing signs from that point, which was in April, up until now, and especially November, which is historically, from seasonality perspective, a good month for crypto, has not been particularly a good month. And there's actually been a slew of like really good news that has hit the crypto market,
Mm-hmm.
and yet prices are not moving up. And that's again the hallmark sign of a bear market, when good news is not even moving the tape like up in prices.
Hmm.
You know that something is really fucking wrong, you know?
Right, and correct me if I'm wrong. Recently, I heard there's efforts, if not on the federal level, but at least you know, more companies, or at least are trying to do this, is trying to get crypto investments to open up in 401ks.
Yeah, definitely. I think probably leading that effort is going to be companies like Schwab and Fidelity, probably your vanguards of the world. I think it's inevitable because young people, not even just young people, people in their 40s and 50s, they want access to this asset class in a more seamless manner, like right out of their broker account, right? Um, and they don't want to sort of take money out of wherever their money currently resides, which is your Vanguard and Charles Schwab, E Trade, Fidelity, whatever. And they don't want to like take it to Coinbase, or they don't want to take it to crypto exchanges and buy separately. They
Mm.
just want everything accessible in one. And if you can buy it, with your 401k already sitting in your brokerage account, why not? I think the only issue right now is some of the crypto products are not necessarily proper securities, or they're not packaged as like Wall Street approved products. Well, that's why you have like ETFs and these things called DATs, which are digital asset treasury vehicles that are more Wall Street, palette accepted. And that means that you can buy it out of your 401k,
Right,
right? I
right,
just think they're shitty products personally,
sure.
because they're not well structured, and the product itself is very, in my opinion, predatory. But point is, like, I don't know. I think it's inevitable that the 401ks and the pensions of the world are going to be buying into the space. It's more so of like, this might be like not so great timing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just where we are, in terms of the market.
Okay, yeah, I'm kind of excited to see where this goes, and I'm probably gonna poke you a little bit more, maybe on our next pod, um, about more of your crypto related stuff. I don't know, we might bring it back a little bit more later, but what I want to do is move into our last topic for the moment. And this is a little bit off what we've been talking about in terms of AI chips and crypto and that kind of stuff and the tech related world. and talk a little bit about what's kind of going on with this gerrymandering effort in the great state of Texas.
Preach.
So, what I want to do again is I kind of want to, for the listeners and the viewers, I kind of want to talk about, what's kind of happening based on where we started this. So, it started back in July 2025. And I don't know how much you actually know about what's recently been going on. So this will be new to you too. But back in 2025, Abbott, he called a special legislative session, right? And the session was there to just force a redrawing of Texas's U.S. House districts. And the justification that was given at that time was constitutional concerns.
Wow.
Those were the quote unquote term used, that were the constitutional concerns that were raised by the U.S. Department of Justice.
Can I just say, man, Abbott might be the most dangerous motherfucker in a wheelchair.
Yeah. And I just recently found out that Abbott was only in this wheelchair because he got hit by a tree or something.
Bro, I know. I learned about that shit a while back. I was like, God damn.
Yeah.
He's been fooling all of us.
And apparently that's how he got rich. He was a lawyer. He got hit by a tree, and then he sued for a lot of money, and then he is where he is now. Anyway, dropping back to this DOJ letter. So the DOJ letter came from the Civil Rights Division and claimed that 4 of Texas's coalition majority non-white districts violated the Voting Rights Act of the Constitution, right? So right now, critics are saying Abbott and Republicans used race as a factor in redistricting, gerrymandering, but used race. And it's not just for partisan advantage. So this is the session where the Democrats in the Texas House, they staged the walkout and they just got up and left the state.
I remember that.
Yeah. So remember, they're all hiding out in DC or wherever here and there. So they do this obviously to, stall any of the redistricting vote. However, despite any of the walkout efforts, Republicans passed the map in another session that was held. So the new map, which they passed in 2025, was designed to create 5 new GOP friendly districts. So that's what happened. That's what they're trying to do. But obviously there's tons of legal kind of challenges and stuff that came up. So civil rights group like the NAACP, LULAC, and MALDEF, MALDEF, they filed lawsuits against the map, right? Accusing it of racial gerrymandering, right? So obviously we know this. But the other major thing was it was diluting minority voting power.
Not surprised.
So you're Black, Latino, all of that. So what recently happened just this month, a federal court of a 3-judge panel blocked that map for being used for the 2026 midterms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Recent block. The court said, on a 3-judge panel, of which it was a 2-to-1 vote.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the court's ruling said that there was substantial evidence that race predominated over partisanship in drawing these new districts out.
Holy shit, man.
Yeah. So Judge Jeffrey Brown, which was part of the majority, wrote that Abbott explicitly directed the legislature to redistrict based on race.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a big deal.
That's a huge deal.
Yeah. So the court ordered Texas to revert back to the 2021 map for the next coming election. Obviously, Abbott did not take this lightly. And he criticized the ruling and said that Texas will appeal directly with the U.S. Supreme Court.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. On their side, Abbott's side, Republican side, there are concerns, however, about the timing of all of this, right? Because the the Canada filing deadline for 2026 is coming up in December. December 8th, if I'm not wrong. So that really compresses the amount of time you could take this case, get it into the court, and get some type of resolution out of it, or get that appeal going, right, and see what comes out of it. So in court, some evidence was revealed that a political operative, let's just use that word, Adam Kincaid, helped draw the map. He had access to a draft of the DOJ letter before it was sent to Abbott and Paxton, who was the attorney general.
Damn.
Yeah.
This is crazy, dude. This is like all news to me. Holy shit.
Yeah, dude. So, the broader implication being that everyone is like, okay, this is a clear power grab, right? So they're trying to expand, the Republicans are trying to expand their House majority at the expense of all Black and Latino voters, right? That's what it seems like it's going to be. But people who support this, your boy Abbott himself and other GOP leaders.
Yeah, why is he my boy?
Yeah.
I hate that motherfucker.
He says the maps were redrawn to better reflect Texans' conservative voting preferences.
Whites.
Yeah. So ultimately, this is probably going to go all the way up to the Supreme Court. And, can have major implications when you're redistricting law and minority voting rights, right? So, the risk is, even if the map is found unlawful, it could remain in place for the 2026 election. So there is that kind of, because simply based on the December 8th timeline, like you have to get stuff done by then. So obviously, I don't know if this guy's your boy or not, Gavin Newsom has something to say about this.
Yeah.
I
have problems with Gavin Newsom of how he's run California, but I don't know if he's as bad as Abbott.
Yeah. So as you may know or may not know, California and Gavin Newsom had a problem with this. And Newsom framed California's move, which I'm going to talk about in a second, as a direct counter to Texas's Republican-backed redistricting. So what he wanted to do was some gerrymandering of his own. He wanted to redraw California's map, right? Because he's like, if Texas can do it, California can do it. Thing is, in California, like a single politician, including just the governor himself, cannot go and redistrict the map himself. Because remember when the governor was in power?
Yeah.
He actually passed a law that prevented one person from going and just changing up district lines.
Interesting.
Yeah. So technically, that can't be done lawfully. Like, you can't just go and gerrymander in California. And the governor is heavily against gerrymandering by any one individual at all. His whole thing was you should leave it up to the people. Right? So in 2025, Newsom, who was backed by a legislative constitutional amendment, which is Prop 50, which is known as today, to redraw California's congressional map, he pushed that. I believe he pushed it through, even though redistricting is normally handled by an independent commission. So the original draft for Prop 50 included a trigger clause that California would redraw only if states like the great state of Texas move forward with a new map. So that's kind of how he's getting around the laws, right?
Wow, that's crazy.
So, but what ended up happening later down the line, that trigger language was removed for whatever reason, and California's new maps would take into effect regardless of Texas's outcome. So I'm not really sure what happened there, but that clause somehow was removed. So the proposed map would shift 5 Republican-held U.S. House seats in California to favor Newsom and the Democrats. And according to the analysis for Prop 50, the change would only be temporary and the map would only be in place up until 2030. So it's not like it would be a permanent change. I guess it would go back to the previous the map after the 2030. Um, so, Newsom's whole thing around this was, this is a patriotic thing and it's a necessary response. And, I believe this is a quote. He's like, we can't unilaterally disarm while other states redraw their states for partisan gain. Right. And obviously there was, people who were for it and against it. Some civil rights groups and map drawers said that the new California map, it still respects the Voting Rights Act principles, because the map has 16 majority Latino districts, which is the same number as before, right? So those actually aren't changing. It's not racial based, right? But Republicans in California opposed it, obviously, because they argue it undermines the state's independent redistricting commission, which was set up by the governors so that one person couldn't go in and just gerrymander, right? And it was created to take politics out of the whole map drawing. Again, while the governor was in place. So they sued to block Prop 50, claiming the map was also racial gerrymandering, which really not, if you look at it, it really wasn't. Even former President Obama chimed in and supported Newsom's plan and said he called it a quote unquote responsible way to respond to what's happening.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So recently, again, November the 4th, it went for a vote, Prop 50, and California voters, by a large margin, approved it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So while Texas's gerrymandering efforts are held up in courts, California's got pushed through. And people are like, no, it's illegal. It can't be done. The difference being Texas's was, you could argue, morally or ethically not all there. But California literally left it up to the voters.
That's amazing.
Right?
That's how it should be.
Right. So with that approval, California can use its new congressional map for the upcoming elections. And, the result of that could be it boosts Democratic leaning representation. But a federal court's blocking of Texas map does not automatically cancel California's new map. So
got it.
That's something to keep in mind. So I thought that was interesting because, again, if you look at it, there's one side to Texas, which some people are saying was racially motivated. California was like, okay, let's just put it to the vote and see what happens.
Yeah. I wonder how this shapes politics for, midterms, the election in 2028. I mean, I feel like, when you watch a show like House of Cards, that gave a lot of people an insight into how politics is so dirty. Not that people already didn't know that, but you get to see the dark, underbelly of it all.
Yeah.
And you realize all these people are fucking crooks and they're all doing some really shady shit somewhere or another to accomplish like a larger goal, right? It's not like, Abbott and Newsom are one is good, one is bad. It's more like they each have their own reasoning of why they're going about doing this. And, morally or ethically, one could be a little bit more wrong. But at the same time, I would imagine that Gavin Newsom also has, ulterior motives, right?
Yeah, I mean, one aspect of it is that, politicians are only there for running towards the next election cycle.
100%.
Right? That's what they're there for. You do just enough where you can run again and then you try and hold on to power. I actually think, unpopular opinion, that governors and, other government leaders, let's just call them that for what it is, should actually have stricter term
limits.
Yeah. Like, what if you only had 1 6-year limit and that's all you could do? 1 6-year term, sorry. And that's all you could do is be governor one time for 6 years.
I don't even know if that's an unpopular opinion. I feel like that is a very popular opinion.
You think so?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of Americans want that. Politicians themselves probably don't because,
right,
vested interest.
Right, but think about what that does, right? It's just like you have one shot to do something for your constituents, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just worrying about, am I going to get elected next? Because then that's all you care about.
I think it's kind of crazy that some political seats, like I think I read that mayors, Zoran being the mayor of New York, I think his max is 2 terms. So let's just say 8 years, right?
Which I thought was crazy because like mayorship is max 8 years, but a governor can be a governor like
Forever.
right,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's totally crazy, and I don't know. Some things about the system make you really rethink reality,
right.
But hey,
And you know what the interesting thing about this whole gerrymandering effort is, just to kind of close that out a little bit. Essentially, what both states were trying to do was trying to create a 5 seat swing, right? So if you combine Texas plus California's reshuffling, could swing up to 10 seats, right? And that could have, you know, you know, the House control could be dramatic just on those 10 seats,
wow.
you know. So I mean, everyone has a reason for redistricting or whatever, gerrymandering, whatever you want to call it. But right now, California's maps are locked in, and Texas isn't yet.
Well, that's why we're having this debate, I guess.
Yeah,
Discuss the most important things.
yeah, and moving on from there, I just want to quickly touch on where you think we are national temperature wise.
Ooh, the national temperature segment.
Yeah, where we stick a thermometer up America's behind.
Oh, yeah.
And look at the temperature.
I think the temperature is probably the same as it was for the last few weeks. I don't think it's gotten better. Next week, we do have CPI data coming up. I mean, I don't even know if that's going to be reported properly because of how much of the lack of data acquisition that's happened because of the government shutdown. But it can't be good. May not be as bad as people may want it to be, but it's definitely not good. And headed into Thanksgiving, it's going to be a topic of discussion, I'm sure, at every dinner table. How young people are struggling to find jobs, to buy homes, inflation being sticky, which impacts 100% of the population, unemployment in general on the rise, Trump sort of elevating the temperature of the country.
Not to mention healthcare costs could potentially skyrocket for predominantly, and I'm not saying this to be sarcastic, Republican-led states.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think there's a lot of things that are going to be up for discussion, and I'd be more curious of how Americans feel after Thanksgiving, because these are going to be things that everybody discusses at the dinner table, in my opinion. And I'd want to see how markets react, how the end of the year closes out.
Do you think we're gonna have a Santa rally?
I don't know. I don't think so personally. I think more and more of the market, I think, is cooling off. Like, even if you sort of think of P&Ls of funds and traders for the past year, as you head into year end, you're probably looking at a market that is elevated, and you're like, let me just lock in some gains, sell out of my positions. Why do I want to take risk of a market that is, so choppy and riddled with not so great news from like a macro perspective? Why take the risk, right? Why put your P&L at risk and, just, clip the gains and walk away? You're done for the year,
Yeah, that's true. I'm kind of hoping for one, if I'm being if I'm being completely honest. I'm hoping for one, praying for one, if you want to say that. But I guess we'll have to see what happens. I'm a little bit worried about a little bit more, as we are average Joes, about our healthcare situation. 100%. I think that part, and we may actually touch on that on our next podcast, a little bit more on kind of where we are with that. But as of right now, Americans are somewhat scared, yet unofficially primed for rates to just skyrocket for their healthcare, even through Medicare, Medicaid, all of those programs. all of those, all of people's premiums are looking to potentially double or 2.5x.
Yeah,
And
I
it's going
saw.
to be,
I had to sign back up for my healthcare, and yeah, let's just say the cost went up quite significantly.
yeah. And I feel like insurance and in general has been something that's been creeping up. Um, I don't really care what kind of insurance it is, car insurance, home insurance, life insurance. I feel like all of those in some way have been creeping up. I know personally, being a homeowner, home insurance has been crazy. Every year, it's nearly doubled.
That's crazy, man.
Nearly, yeah. And it's just another one of those hidden costs that you have of owning a home. Um, Maybe not so hidden. It's just something that, is part of home ownership. But what is hidden is why these rates are just significantly going up. They have their reasons. They'll say weather related, a lot of payouts, XYZ, and that may be there. But, I think a closer look can be taken at that too.
Well, let's take a closer look next time.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk about the insurance industry.
Yeah,
and how that
how they're all scammers and frauds.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, folks, that's our pod for today. I think it's the best one we've ever done.
I learned a lot.
Yeah. If y'all think we missed something or you got a topic you want us to overanalyze next, let Amol know, because I'm probably not going to do that. But
I will only pick like the funniest comments.
Yeah, or the greatest topics, the weirdest topics to talk about. But if you want us to see it, hit the comments, and we will try to get to the best one. But until next time, peace.
Put a crush out. Put a crush out. Put a crush out.